Hello students, welcome to session 2 of reproduction in plants. We studied about the three common forms of the simplest asexual reproduction, the simplest form of asexual reproduction. And that was budding, fragmentation and spore formation. So in today's session we are going to continue the topic of asexual reproduction, in which we will discuss about a type of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative reproduction. So let us start with today's interesting session and let us study about vegetative reproduction. Yes students, we know that there are many simpler forms of asexual reproductions by which organisms can reproduce, but there are other forms too. Like new plants can be produced from above ground or below ground, horizontal runners like stolons of strawberries, rhizomes of many grasses, tubers of potato or dahlia, bulbs of onion and garlic, corms of gladiola or crocus, bulbils on the shoot like lily or many grasses. So there are many such plants which can reproduce asexually or vegetatively. So vegetative propagation is the new cells which separate from the parent and forming a complete independent individual. Plants can reproduce asexually by vegetative propagation. In this type of asexual reproduction, roots, stems and leaves are the vegetative structures, and some plants reproduce vegetatively by special structures such as bulbs, corms, tubers, runners and rhizomes. So students, farmers and gardeners have taken advantage of different plants' ability to reproduce asexually for generations. Artificial vegetative propagation allows gardeners and farmers to grow plant with certain traits. Like a cutting is any vegetative part of the plant used to produce a new individual. Cloning is a scientifically engineered reproductive technology that involves infusing the genetic material from a parent organism into another plant of another cell. So basically we can say that vegetative reproduction is also a type of sexual reproduction in which a cell, tissue or part of an organ of a plant develops into a new organism. In some plants, vegetative parts such as root, stem and leaf can be used to produce new plants, and this can be done by natural as well as artificial methods. So basically there are natural methods and artificial methods of asexual reproduction, that is the vegetative reproduction, a type of asexual reproduction. So basically vegetative reproduction is a form of asexual reproduction in plants. It does not involve flowers, pollination and seed production. Instead, a new plant grows from a vegetative plant, usually a stem of the parent plant. However, plants which reproduce asexually almost always reproduce sexually as well, bearing flowers, fruits and seeds. But vegetative reproduction from a stem usually involves the buds. So instead of producing a branch, the bud grows into a complete plant which eventually becomes self-supporting. Since no gametes are involved in asexual reproduction, the plants produced asexually have no offspring like the sexual ones. They have asexually identical genomes and the offspring from what is known as a clone. In some cases of vegetative reproduction, the structures involved also become storage organs and swell with the stored food. For example, potatoes. They are the swollen structures. So the principal types of vegetative reproduction structures are bulbs, corms, rhizomes and runners, as well as stems, roots and leaves. So the first method which we are going to discuss is natural methods. Like most plants reproduce naturally without the involvement of human beings, and they do so by natural methods using stems, roots and leaves. So here we are going to study about each of the plant part which reproduce naturally and asexually in detail. The first one is the roots. Now students, tuberous roots of dahlia, like here you can see this beautiful structure, this beautiful picture is that of dahlia, which has swollen root, which is also called as tuber. So tuberous roots of dahlia, sweet potato and asparagus can grow into new plant by multiplication. So this is the beautiful picture of sweet potato where you can see the roots. Here there are some roots. So what happens that these roots form tuber-like structure by multiplication. So remember students, this is one such natural method of vegetative reproduction. The other method, natural method of vegetative reproduction, is that of stems. Students, stems are the most common part for the vegetative reproduction. Here you can see the beautiful picture of oxalis. This is oxalis plant. Different species of oxalis plant. So here plants such as oxalis and grass grow horizontal stems parallel to the ground, almost touching it. So basically, above ground or underground stems is the most common example of asexual reproduction in plants. Stolons or runners are horizontal stems. They shoot from a leaf node, and instead of developing into leaves, they develop into stems with very few leaves. And these stems produce roots that go down into the soil while shooting new leaves above the ground. Shooting means the shoot system, forming the shoot system. So there are many examples of asexual reproduction or vegetative reproduction through stolons. Same way rhizomes, bulbs, corms and tubers are used to store food. They are used as stored food, and they are born underground as a part of the root system. Right? So these are some of the examples. Other than oxalis, there are some more examples. But before discussing about it, let us see what is this. Yes, plants such as oxalis and grass grow horizontal stems parallel to the ground, as I said before, almost touching it. So new roots sprout from the nodes, which are slightly swollen areas which occur at regular intervals on a stem or branch. And then these new shoots also grow upwards, forming new plants at frequent intervals. In the same way, there are other plants like chrysanthemum. In plants such as mint and chrysanthemum, horizontal stems arise from the base of the erect shoot, and they grow horizontally in the soil, and then they come out to form new aerial shoots. So this is one such beautiful example. So these shoots, basically they become independent plants when stems break away from the parent plants. Other than these, there are some plants that have arched stems which cross over small obstacles and develop small plantlets at their nodes, for example Vallisneria and wild strawberry. Right, so this is the beautiful structure of Vallisneria, and this is the beautiful picture of wild strawberry. Right? So these are the plants that have arched stems and they develop small plantlets at their nodes. There are other plants too, like there are some plants which have stems which grow underground. They are mostly swollen because they have food stored in them, and this food is used by the new plants to grow. So the different types of underground stem are rhizomes, bulbs, tubers, and corms. So let us discuss about these different types of underground stem. Yes, here you can see the beautiful picture of ginger, rhizome of ginger. What is this? Rhizome of ginger. Now basically, students' rhizomes have buds from which outgrowths are produced which give rise to new plants, and this is seen in ginger, turmeric and banana. So rhizomes are basically stems which grow horizontally under the ground, and in some cases the underground stems are swollen with food reserves, and the terminal bud, here you can see the bud. This is the terminal bud because it is located at the end. So this is called terminal bud. So the terminal bud turns upwards to produce the flowering shoot, and the lateral buds, like these buds, like these buds, they may grow out to form new rhizomes. So terminal bud, it goes upwards to produce the flowering shoot, while the lateral buds, they may grow out to form new rhizomes. And in this way, rhizome of ginger develops. Other than this, there are bulbs. Now here, bulbs are considered, or they can be considered to be very short underground stems which are encased in thickened fleshy bulb scales. Bulb scales means the modified leaves. As you can see here, this is the beautiful picture of the bulb of onion. Now here, as we discussed, that bulbs can be considered to be very short underground stems. So here the scales serve as sites of food accumulation. And in the spring season, when a new plant shoots up from the center of the scale cluster, like this, the center of the scale cluster, it will draw its food from the scales. So in this way, bulbs consist of very short stems with closely packed leaves arranged in concentric circles. Here you can see the concentric circles. So basically, bulbs consist of very short stems with closely packed leaves and which are arranged in concentric circles round the stem. And these leaves are swollen with stored food. For example, this in onion. A terminal bud will produce next flowering shoot, and the lateral bud will produce new plants. Same way as in rhizomes. So we studied about rhizomes and bulbs. Now let us see what are tubers. Now here, tubers are also the ones which have buds in the eyes which give rise to new plants. For example, in potato. So this is tuber of potato which has shoot, which has eye, just basically yellow in color. This is an imaginary figure, and these are the small roots. So students, in the potato plant, lateral buds at the base of the stem produce shoots which grow laterally at first and then down into the ground. and these are comparable to rhizomes as they are underground stems with tiny scaly leaves and lateral buds. So they do not swell evenly along their length with stored food. Basically, food made in the leaves of the potato passes to the ends of the rhizomes, which swell and form the tubers, which we call as potatoes. So since the potato tuber is a stem, it has leaves and lateral buds. These are the familiar eyes. So here we can consider eye as lateral buds. So each one of these can produce a new shoot in the following year using the food stored in the tuber. And so the old tubers shrivel and rot away at the end of the season. So in this way, stem tubers form in potato. Other than these, there are other plants too which form corms. Now here, corms are lots of rhizomes joined together which develop into new plants, like in Gladiolus and Colocasia. So this is the corm of Gladiolus. This is the beautiful picture of the corm of Gladiolus. So this is the corm. This bulb-like structure is the corm. So basically, what happens in these type of plants, that corms also have a short stem, but in this case it is the stem itself which swells and stores food, and the circular leaves form only papery scales with bulbs, and the terminal bud grows into a flowering shoot and the lateral buds produce new plants. So in this way corms develop. Other than Gladiolus, there is one more plant which is Colocasia. So in Colocasia, here you can see the stolon which runs horizontally. These are the aerial leaves, and this is the corm from which the new plant develops. So students, other than these plants which develop through tubers, which form tubers, corms, rhizomes and bulbs, so these are different types of underground stem which develop asexually, right? So these are natural methods of vegetative reproduction. So we studied about stems. Other than these, there are runners too. Let me write it down for you. Runners. So students, runners are also horizontal stems growing from the parent plant, but they grow above ground, not underground. And when the terminal buds touch the ground, they take root and produce new plants. So students, these are the runners. There are some plants that produce by developing runners. So plants such as strawberry have a very short stem called a rootstock with thin scale leaves. So we can see this in a plant called strawberry, where foliage, leaves and flowers grow from the buds in the axils of the scale leaves, and some of the lower buds produce shoots which grow horizontally over the surface of the ground, and they bear scale leaves and buds, while the terminal buds of the runners turn up and produce daughter plants some distance away from the parent plant, and the new plant developing adventitious roots. And later the runner shrivels away, and the runner does not store food but conducts it from the parent plant to the daughters until they are well developed. In the same way, besides these runners, there are stolons too. So some examples like blackberry stem. Blackberry stems have, or they form a rather different type of runner in which the main shoot forms the new individual, and when the growing end of the shoot arches over and touches the ground, the terminal bud curves up, producing a new shoot which soon develops the adventitious roots, and this way they reproduce asexually. So in this way many such underground stems reproduce asexually. Like we studied about onion, we studied about the sweet potato and corm of Gladiolus and Colocasia. So in bulbs, the underground stem which are modified, in these bulbs like onion and tulip, the food is not sent to the leaf bases but the lateral buds. And as these buds enlarge, they form two or more daughter bulbs inside the old bulb, and the leaves of the old bulb shrivel and dry out, forming the dry scales which surround the daughter bulbs. And in both the cases, when the daughter bulbs they grow, they form a clump together with the parent bulb. Even in corms, in spring season, the food stored in the corm enables the terminal bud to grow rapidly and produce leaves and flowers above ground. And later in the year, food made by the leaves is sent back not to the old corm but to the base of the stem immediately above it, because it grows above the ground. So this region swells and forms a new corm on the top of the old, now shriveled corm. And some of the lateral buds on the old corm have also grown and produced new plants with corms. So in this way some plants develop. Same way in rhizomes. In plants with rhizomes, the stem remains below ground but continues to grow horizontally. So the old part of the stem does not die away in the bulbs and corms, as in bulbs and corms, but lasts for several years. Like for example, in rhizomes, there is a plant called iris plant. So in iris, the terminal bud turns up and produces leaves and flowers above ground, and the old leaf bases form circular scales round the rhizome, which is swollen with food reserves, and lateral buds grow into new rhizomes. So basically the annual cycle of a rhizome is similar to that of a corm. In late spring or early summer, food from the leaves passes back to the rhizome and lateral bud uses it, and it grows horizontally underground, and so it continues to form the rhizome. And other lateral buds produce new rhizomes which branch from the parent stem. Whereas the terminal buds of these branches of the iris plant curve upwards and produce new leafy shoots and flowers. Even they develop contractile adventitious roots which grow from the nodes of the underground stem and keep it at a constant depth. So they develop contractile and adventitious roots. But students, what are the contractile roots? Yes, the formation of one corm onto the another tends to bring the successive corms nearer and nearer to the soil surface. So adventitious roots develop from the base. The adventitious roots develops from the base of the new corm, and once these have grown firmly in the soil, a region near the junction with the stem contracts and pulls the new corm down, keeping it at a constant level in the soil. So wrinkles can be seen on these contractile roots where shrinkage has taken place. Even bulbs also have contractile roots which counteract the tendency in successive generations to grow out of the soil. So in this way, we can say that by natural methods of vegetative propagation, there are many plants which grow with the different types of underground stem. Right? Different types of underground stem means they are modified underground stem, like rhizomes, bulbs, tubers, corms. Other than these, there are runners and stolons too. So we studied about roots and we discussed about stems. Now the third part of the plant which we are going to discuss, which actually gets modified, is leaves. So students, leaves of a number of plants such as Bryophyllum develop small buds called adventitious buds on their margin. So here you can see the beautiful diagram of Bryophyllum. Now what happens that these are some of the buds. These are buds. These are called as adventitious buds. So these buds grow into new plants when the leaf falls from the parent plant. So when this will get detached from the parent plant and they will fall on the soil, this plant will fall on the soil and then it will develop into a new plant, a new Bryophyllum plant. So basically there are many such leaves. There are other leaves too which are deeply veined leaves or succulent leaves like that of cacti, which are all capable of producing plantlets from the leaves. So the plantlets are produced of the leaf by the leaf margins that fall to the ground and take root, and they mature into individual plants. There are aquatic plants too like duckweed which reproduce in this manner. And the amazing thing about this method is that the leaf that reproduces may not always bear leaves, or they not always get attached to the plant. And a fallen leaf is also capable of producing leaflets as long as the cells and tissues are alive. So how amazing it is about the leaves of the plant. So students, this was all about the natural methods of the vegetative reproduction. In the next session, we will discuss about the artificial methods of vegetative reproduction. I hope you liked today's session, learning about the natural methods of vegetative reproduction. So we will meet in the next session. Till then, keep learning, keep enjoying. Have a nice time.